Hi, Charles SirBookSage here with an attempt at a discussion video for House of Chains, Book 4 of Malazan Book of the Fallen. How do you talk about a book that has so many moving parts, so many characters, so many different things happening all over the place? Some of which come together, some of are which just setups for future things down the road. One of the biggest challenges I think people face with Malazan is that there's so many characters, so many situations, and Erikson just throws you into the deep end, and you just kind of have to figure things out as you go. He doesn't really hold your hand. But as you continue deeper into this series, you start to get a better picture for what's happening. And I can see why the big Malazan fans reread this series and reread it multiple times, because you can already tell, just as a Song of Ice and Fire fan, and seeing how much you pick up on a reread, you can already tell that there's a lot you're missing this first go round, which is what I'm doing. This is my first time reading these books, and I can just tell that there are things that I can't pick up yet. I'm not expected to pick up yet, but I imagine if I do a reread of this at some point, I'll be able to understand and go, oh, that's who that is. Because characters will pop up and just throw a wrench in what's going on, and then off they go. And Erikson doesn't really tell you who they are sometimes. And I imagine on rereads, you pretty much know who those people are at that point. But anyway, onto the actual book. After the prologue, which again, there's always interesting prologues that tie in to the book and the series as a whole, we meet this young Teblor named Karsa Orlong. Now, Karsa Orlong I knew was a fan favorite, one of lots of people's favorite character in the series, and I absolutely hated this guy in the beginning. I started reading this in actually late July, and I really struggled with it because I just despised this character, Karsa Orlong. Because he's young and he just wants to go out and just slaughter and rape everything that moves, which is what he does for a few hundred pages. I just wasn't getting him. I was like, how is this guy everyone's favorite character? I'm not seeing it. The first interesting thing that happened with him was when he was able to turn this pack of wild dogs or wild wolves, whatever they were, to his will. He was able to bend them to his will and start using them to help him conquer and do everything he was doing. So that was the first sign that, okay, there might be something more to this guy. And it wasn't until he ends up getting captured and imprisoned and chained onto this, I think, some big log or some sort of thing with these other prisoners who are people from different races that he would normally just spit on and crush on his way to do something else. And this is really where his character arc, his story, his growth as a character begins once he becomes a prisoner. But I had stopped reading in late August and put it aside because I was really struggling with it. It doesn't usually take me an entire month just to read 300 pages, but that's where I was. But I came back to it at the beginning of the year here, and I sat down and I'm like, okay, I need to get through this book. So I picked it back up, opened it up to where I left off, started reading, and the next thing I know, it's 400 more pages in. The book just took off for me after another 30 or 40 pages from where I had left off. And then I devoured it in just a couple more sittings. And I ended up really liking this book, liking it a lot more than I thought I was going to like it based upon those first 300 pages. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. So the first third of it was a 3.5 star. The rest of the book was 4.5 star book to me. So 4 stars overall. And Karsa Orlong is now one of my favorite characters in the whole series so far. I get now why people like this guy. And he plays some interesting roles in this particular book, where he ends up as one of the bodyguards of Shaik, this sort of the whirlwind goddess of the apocalypse. And that's one of the interesting things about this book is one of the challenges, just as kind of an aside, with reading Malazan books that I've noticed so far. There's all this stuff happening in the first half of the book. All these characters, plots, subplots, side plots, Sometimes they interweave, sometimes they don't. Some things are setting up what's happening in this book. Other things are setting up stuff that's coming like books later by the looks of it. But by the time you get around the midway point, you begin to realize, okay, where the book is headed. Like, what's the big confrontation that's going to be the climax of the book. And in this one, it is the confrontation that's building between the two Perrin sisters. You know, the adjunct, Tavore Perrin, and Shaik, the whirlwind goddess, who's Fellaisin Perrin. And Fellaisin's journey as a character has been really interesting. Because she's the younger sister. She was pretty much handed over by Tavore and became a prisoner and was working, I don't know if it was the mines or whatever it was. And this character, Heboric, helped her escape. And their whole storyline has been going and going. And they headed towards this, like, Shaik, this goddess of the whirlwind, and got there at a pivotal moment in one of the earlier books where Fellaisin ends up basically taking the Shaik role and kind of becomes possessed, I think, by a god or a goddess, whatever, and becomes a very dislikable character after that, because you had a lot of sympathy for Fellaisin in that whole journey until she becomes Shaik. And then she's really someone you really don't like. The story really builds and builds and builds towards this big confrontation, this battle between the adjunct and the Malazan's 14th army, and I think it's the 14th, and Shaik's whirlwind soldiers. But you also have Pearl, the Claw, running around, and you have this like psychotic wizard, this mage, who likes to mutilate women. That whole story. And what happens to him is, I mean, this is one of the things where Karsa Orlong is just great. And it's one of my favorite things about this story and him as a character, to get back to him for a moment, is he's in a position to defend Shaik. And he's like, you know what? I'm out. I have no interest. The Malazans are not my enemy at this point. So I'm not doing this. And the crippled god is trying to, like, get him and get his hands on him and chain him and to become a tool for him. And Karsa's like, basically, to the crippled god, and no one's chaining me anymore. I had that, and it's never happening again. So you all basically, can screw yourselves. Again, he's a wild card, and he just does his own thing, and he doesn't care what he wrecks, what he messes up. His whole, like, finale of the book is just awesome. I'm trying to do kind of cover this discussion without really getting heavy into spoilers. The main thing here is this final confrontation between the two armies. And one of Erikson's strengths as a writer is his handling of battle. He's really good at giving us every facet of a conflict, of a military conflict, in a fantasy setting. We follow the generals, the fists and high fists and everything, and all their plans and their strategies, and the armies fighting each other. And he also gets down into the nitty-gritty, where it's the street-to-street fighting, the hand-to-hand combat. He gets all the way down to that micro level, and is really good at writing that kind of action at all those different levels. It's one of my favorite things about this series is how well he handles action and fighting. Again, at every kind of level, from the macro down to the micro level. And we had some interesting things, again, happen in this, like throwbacks to the bridge burners and a few other things. I just came away from this book, again, really excited for the series. Memories of Ice is still my favorite. This one is probably Memories of Ice, Dead House Gates, House of Chains, and Gardens of the Moon, how I would rank them. House of Chains is just barely behind Dead House Gates. I imagine I'll probably enjoy the whole first 300 pages a lot more on a reread now that I know more about Karsa and his growth as a character and his just overall storyline. I'll probably enjoy that first part of the book a lot more the second time around. So, which would increase, which means it might end up being a 4.5 book on a reread. Who knows? As challenging as it is, because you have so many characters thrown at you, so many situations thrown at you, characters' names change. When you have like 300 characters and half them change their names after a few books and want to be called different things, it really is quite a challenge, but worth every moment of it. And as I go deeper into this series, you start slowly, little by little, getting a clearer kind of picture of what's going on. You never know what's really going to happen, because when you have a character like Karsa Orlong, who can just show up and wreck shop on the plot and on characters, and like characters that we've seen like Akariam, another one like that, who just, when you unleash that guy, he's just another just killing machine. And even the gods will get involved in these wars, and one god will kind of pop up and it's just like, let me just slide that to the left, and a different god will be like, let me slide that over to the right, and another god might go, you slid that to the right, yeah, let me move that back. So you have gods messing with mortals, you have gods messing with gods, and then gods messing with the same mortals. It's just crazy stuff goes on. But overall, again, this was a really interesting book. To struggle so much in the beginning, to hate this main character, only to, by the end, really love this book and just love this character. Again, that's a journey I wasn't expecting. I was a little worried if the series was a sustainable thing with how much I struggled with that first part of this book. But by the end of it, I'm just like, oh yeah, I can't wait to dive in. To show you how good this series is becoming, I immediately read Midnight Tides and The Bone Hunters right back to back right after this in the matter of just a couple of days. And those were 5-star reads. So this is a series that just is getting better and better and better as it goes along. I don't know if this kind of little discussion made any sense at all. Listening to myself talk, I don't think I actually explained anything about this story. It's really difficult to talk about this in general, especially as a first-time reader, because there's so much I know I've missed. So much I don't know what's actually going on. There's so many characters, and it is hard to keep them, like, which one is this again? Which side is this person on? And what were they involved in before? And then with them changing their names and everything, it gets a little... It's a challenge, but I like a challenge like this as a reader. It's really hard to do these kind of like discussion videos when I'm trying not to spoil the actual book for someone who hasn't read it yet, because it's really hard to talk about without giving away those critical details. So I don't know, maybe I'll end up trying to do a non-spoilery one like this and then a full-blown spoiler one as I move forward. I don't know. We'll see. Just let me know if this made any sense at all, or was this just a rambling, coherent mess. But if you haven't read Malazan and you're a fantasy reader, you're a fantasy fan, go for it. Understand you're being thrown in the deep end, and it's up to you to sink or swim. But it's been worth the challenge, and especially, again, books 5 and 6 were just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And I've already started my next read, which is actually Return of the Crimson Guard, because I'm reading the main series and the companion series mixed together. Anyway, go read House of Chains. Karsa Orlong is worth the effort, and you're gonna, you might love him from the first moment he's on page. Like I said, I hated the guy. And that's it. Yeah, I'm gonna stop here, otherwise I'm just gonna keep rambling. I am Charles of SirBookSage. Happy reading.